What would you do if a bank teller looked at your ID, then your card, then you twice, and said, "Your husband really didn't tell you"? That's the sentence that ended my honeymoon before it even started. 3 days married, and a stranger behind a counter knew something about my own life that I didn't. If a story like this hits close to home, hit subscribe now, because what I found on that screen wasn't the worst part. The worst part was who already knew and how long they'd known it. My name is Maggie. I'm 39 years old, and until that Tuesday I taught 4th grade and thought my biggest financial secret was the emergency chocolate stash in my desk drawer. That was about to change. 3 days earlier, Nathan and I got married at the Franklin County Courthouse on a Friday afternoon, then had dinner with family and a few close friends at a little Italian place in Grandview. I'd met him almost 2 years before that, when his daughter Lily landed in my classroom. Sweet kid, sharp as a tack, and stubborn in a way I secretly admired. Nathan was the dad who showed up at pickup looking like he'd apologized to 6 people on the drive over. "Sorry, meeting ran long," he'd say, or once, "I do actually know what time school lets out." He drove a beat-up Chevy Malibu with a cracked taillight and a hubcap that had clearly filed for divorce years earlier. When people asked what he did for work, he'd say commercial real estate, and I pictured leases and building maintenance. I never asked what he made. Why would I? The day Lily spiked a fever at school, Nathan showed up 20 minutes later, hair a mess, looking genuinely rattled. "She's furious I told her she can't go to soccer," he said. Lily, from the nurse's cot, muttered, "I can still play." Nathan looked at me like I'd understand his suffering. I told him I spent 7 hours a day with her. He had my condolences. That was Nathan. Dry. Quiet. Never trying too hard. At 39, I hadn't given up on love, I'd just given up on hunting for it, which is a different thing entirely. I'd let well-meaning friends set me up with men who were perfect for me mostly because they had a pulse and a mortgage. Dating apps had been worse. One guy described himself as financially independent in his profile and then asked if I could Venmo him for the Uber home. So no, I wasn't bitter. I was tired, and tired had made me careful in a way bitterness never could have. He waited until Lily was out of my class to ask me out. I respected that. We ran into each other at a grocery store that summer, him holding a bag of charcoal like it was a hostage negotiation. "Would you want to get coffee sometime?" he asked, and he looked nervous, which surprised me. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into weekends. He forgot flowers but remembered I hated cilantro. He was good with Lily in ways that mattered. He listened, he apologized when he was wrong, he never acted like parenting deserved applause. 14 months after that first coffee, he proposed on a Tuesday of all days in the produce section of the same grocery store where he'd first asked me out, which I found unbearably sweet and he insisted was a coincidence. Before the wedding, he told me his family had money in commercial property and that he wanted a prenup. I had my own attorney, Monica Alvarez, review it. She told me carefully that he had substantial interests in several family companies and properties. I heard comfortable. Pictured a nice house, a paid-off car, maybe a vacation fund. I did not hear $14.6 million sitting loose in a checking account, which is the number I was about to see with my own eyes in a strip mall bank branch on my lunch break, 3 days into being somebody's wife. 3 days after the wedding, Nathan handed me a debit card with my name already printed on it. "Buy whatever you want," he said. I laughed, dangerous sentence, and asked what account it pulled from. "Ours," he said. That was it. So on my lunch break, I walked into the bank to actually look at ours. The teller, Denise according to her name tag, verified my ID, then went quiet in a way that made my stomach drop before she'd said a word. She turned the screen toward me. I counted the digits. Then I counted them again. "I'm guessing this is new information," Denise said gently. "Lady, I teach 4th grade. If I'd known this yesterday, I would not have packed leftover casserole for lunch." I walked out, sat in my Subaru with the engine off, and called my husband. "Nathan, what exactly do you mean when you say commercial property?" Silence. Not long. just long enough to answer the question without saying anything. "Where are you?" he asked. "Outside the bank." "Don't drive." "I'm coming." 20 minutes later, that ancient Malibu pulled into the lot. Nathan crossed the pavement toward me wearing a shirt I'd bought him on clearance. A man worth 9 figures in a $9 shirt. He got in. I didn't say hello. "Start talking." "The account's ours," he said. "I added you after the wedding." "I gathered that, Nathan. There's $14 million in it." "I know." That answer did something to me. Not anger, clarity. "You know that I know?" "No." "I thought I'd explain everything after the wedding. After you know how that sounds." There was something to explain, he admitted, and then he told me the rest. That his father had started Whitfield Realty Group in 1981 outside Dayton with one small warehouse, and that it had grown into shopping centers, medical buildings, and storage facilities across 3 states. That the family's holdings ran 9 figures. That he'd let me buy him tires. That he'd let me split dinner checks for over a year while I quietly worried he was scraping by. "You just watched me believe it," I said. He had no answer for that. And that silence told me more than the number on the screen ever could. I sat there running the math backward, every "let's split it," every time I'd quietly slid the check toward myself first so he wouldn't have to feel bad, every time I'd mentally budgeted a gift for him because I assumed money was tight. None of it had been kindness on my part. It had been me filling in blanks he'd left empty on purpose. If you're the kind of person who stays quiet in a moment like this and then goes home and Googles everything at 2 a.m., go ahead and subscribe now because you're going to want to see how this actually gets resolved. We drove home separately. The kitchen table, Nathan offered to take me off the account, then offered to buy me a new car like the Subaru was somehow the injury here. "You think the car is the problem?" I asked. "I know it's not," he admitted. "I'm just trying to fix something." I slid the debit card back across the table. "I need to understand what our marriage actually is before I spend $1 of it." He nodded slowly, then said the sentence that made my stomach drop a second time that day. "We probably need to talk to my mother." "Why?" He didn't answer right away. And in a marriage that's 3 days old, not right away is its own kind of answer. Sunday dinner at Diane's was roast chicken in a dining room that looked like nothing had ever been spilled in it. Nathan's sister Renee arrived 10 minutes late, kissed him on the cheek, and gave me a long, unreadable look. "I suppose the secret's out," Renee said partway through dinner. "Secret?" I repeated, and something about that word sat wrong in my chest. Diane changed the subject, then circled back with a question dressed up as small talk. "You're still planning to teach?" "For as long as they keep paying me." "Of course," Diane said, in a tone that meant there was absolutely a reason to ask. By the 5th question about my town home, my retirement account, and whether we'd renovate the kitchen, I put my cup down. "Is there something you actually want to ask me?" The room went still. Renee didn't blink. "You have to admit your circumstances changed rather dramatically this week." "My circumstances changed when I married your brother. My information changed this week." She asked if I'd signed the prenup knowing what was in it. I told her the truth. Monica had walked me through what stayed his, what stayed mine, what I was giving up. I'd never asked for a spreadsheet valuing every building on the family's asset schedule. I was deciding whether to marry Nathan, not appraising him. Diane said the quiet part in a very soft voice. "Nathan's been through a difficult divorce. Lily has to come first." "Did you talk about this before we got married?" I asked Nathan directly. His face barely moved. That was answer enough. Later in the car, I asked him the real question. "When Renee suggested I might have already known about the money and married you for it anyway, what did you say?" "Nothing," he admitted. "Not right away." I stared at him. My own husband had needed a few seconds to decide whether his wife was telling the truth. "If you think that's the moment this marriage should have ended, don't go anywhere, because we haven't even gotten to the folder yet, and that's the part that actually broke us open." Subscribe so you don't miss where this goes. I already knew Nathan had been married before, to a woman named Kristen, now in Cincinnati, who shared custody of Lily on alternating weekends. He'd only ever said their marriage got ugly around money and family. That week, he finally told me the rest. Kristen had wanted the bigger house, the lifestyle Nathan grew up around, the version of the Whitfield name that came with a driveway full of cars. Diane had distrusted her from day one, before the wedding actually, which Nathan admitted almost as an afterthought. Renee had questioned every purchase Kristen made, down to a set of dish towels. And Nathan, instead of standing anywhere, had stood in the middle of all of it, telling himself that staying quiet was the same thing as staying fair. I didn't want to take sides, he said. There weren't 3 sides, Nathan. You were married. You just made sure nobody could blame you for choosing. I thought if I stayed out of it, it would blow over. Did it? He didn't answer that one either. Kristen left 2 years later, and from what Nathan told me, the divorce lawyers spent more time arguing about who said what to Diane than about anything Kristen and Nathan actually owned together. He went very quiet after he told me that part. I'd meant my comment to sting, and it did, but I also finally understood something. This wasn't new behavior he developed for me. This was a pattern with a track record, and I was watching it happen to me in real time, just with better manners. A week later, Diane called a family meeting about the company trusts. Nathan mentioned it at breakfast, then added almost too casually, "You don't need to come. It's mostly family business." I thought I was family. That's not what I meant. I let him go without a fight, which surprised him more than an argument would have. What I didn't tell him was that Frank Delgado, the family's longtime accountant, a soft-spoken man who'd known Nathan since he was in diapers, had called me the night before. "I probably shouldn't say this," Frank told me quietly, "but there's a document your mother-in-law's planning to bring up at that meeting. One you should probably see before she shows it to you cold." I didn't know exactly what he meant yet. Frank had done the family's books for over 20 years, quietly, without ever inserting himself into anything, which is exactly why a call from him landed so hard. All he'd tell me was that Diane had asked him to draft language protecting the family's position, and that whatever it was, I shouldn't be blindsided by it in a room full of Whitfields. I only knew that a man who'd never called me before had suddenly decided I needed a head start. Nathan came home from that meeting at 6:15 looking like he'd aged a year in an afternoon. "How'd it go?" I asked. "Fine," he said. One word. In a marriage, fine usually means more questions are required. The next evening, I finally pushed. "Did Renee say anything about me at that meeting?" "She asked whether you really had no idea about the money before we got married." "And what did you say?" He looked at the floor a beat too long. "Nothing." "Not right away." I stood up from the counter. "How long is not right away, Nathan?" "A couple of seconds." "Then I told her you didn't know." "You had to think about it first." He didn't argue. He couldn't. I packed a bag that night and drove to Paula's. She took one look at my suitcase and said, "Guest room's clean, wine's questionable, come in." She'd been asking me 0 questions for 17 years, which is exactly why we were still friends. Lily called the next evening. "Are you still my stepmom if you don't live here?" she asked, and my chest cracked right down the middle. "Yes," I told her. "None of this is because of you. I'm not disappearing on you." She said okay so quietly I almost didn't hear it. 3 days later, Diane asked to meet me privately at a restaurant near Easton. She arrived with a leather folder and slid it across the table before the coffee even came. Inside was a proposal, a specific number, $2.3 million, in exchange for my agreement to additional limits on any future claim to the family's holdings. "You're offering me money," I said. "I'm offering certainty," Diane replied. Eventually, Maggie, money changes everyone. I thought about the old wedding photo on her wall. A nervous 22-year-old standing beside Nathan's father. Did it change you? For half a second, her composure slipped. Then it was gone, and so was any answer. I took the folder back to Paula's and put it in a dresser drawer. I told myself Nathan didn't need to know yet. He was already fighting with his family, Lily was unsettled, and I hadn't decided what I thought. Sounded reasonable. Then I heard my own voice say it, and I realized with considerable annoyance that I was starting to sound exactly like my husband. I kept that folder in the drawer for 2 days. Long enough that Paula finally asked over coffee, "You tell him yet?" "No." "You've spent 3 weeks furious that Nathan decided what you needed to know and when." "Just saying." That afternoon I called him over and put the folder on the table. He read 2 pages, hit the number, and reached for his phone before I stopped him. "She gave it to me Thursday," I said. "Thursday? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were already dealing with your family." "Because I told myself I was protecting you." I let that sit. That's when I finally understood how easy it is to call secrecy protection. "I'm sorry," he said. "So am I." It was the first conversation since I'd left where neither of us was trying to win. After that, Nathan stopped making promises and started making appointments. He found a therapist, Dr. Bell, who had this unnerving habit of waiting 3 full seconds after any answer until you cracked and told the truth underneath it. At our 3rd session, Nathan said, "I was trying to protect Maggie." Dr. Bell just looked at him. He sighed. "Fine. I was protecting myself." He told Diane and Renee he would no longer discuss me with them unless I was there or had agreed to it. When Diane argued she was only protecting Lily, Nathan told her that protecting his daughter didn't require treating his wife like a pending lawsuit. My colleague Priya, who'd caught me crying in the staff lounge more than once that month, told me something that stuck. "The money was never really the problem, Mags. The problem is whether he'll choose honesty when it's inconvenient. Watch what he does now, not what he says." Priya had her own history with a man who'd hidden things, nothing on Nathan's scale, just debt he'd buried under excuses, and she'd learned the hard way that apologies are cheap and follow-through is the only currency that actually counts. So I watched. I watched whether Nathan mentioned Dr. Bell's sessions unprompted or only when I asked. I watched whether he told Diane no to her face or let me be the bad guy by proxy. Small things, but small things were exactly where he'd hidden the big thing in the first place. 11 weeks after I left, the Whitfield Family Foundation held its annual dinner downtown. I almost skipped it, then realized I'd be staying home to protect Diane and Renee's comfort, and I was done doing that. Nathan and I arrived together. Renee lasted about 40 minutes before she couldn't help herself, smiling at my dress and saying, just loud enough, "Well, Maggie's had quite a change in circumstances lately." I didn't let it slide this time. "Your mother offered me $2.3 million a few weeks ago," I said to the small circle around us. The room went very quiet. Nobody in this family has once asked what I'd do for Nathan. Only what I'd do for his money. Diane's composure finally cracked. "You have no idea what I went through. Nathan's grandfather had people investigate my family before the wedding. He told my husband I'd leave the moment something better came along. I spent years proving him wrong." "I believe you," I said. "That's exactly why I thought you'd know better than to do it to me." Then Nathan spoke, and he wasn't looking at his mother. "Maggie didn't deceive anyone. I let her marry me without the full truth because I was afraid it would change how she saw me. And when Renee questioned her, I hesitated. That's on me." Renee left before dessert. Diane stayed and said almost nothing else all night. If your chest is tight right now the way mine was standing in that ballroom, hit that like button, because Nathan finally sang it out loud in front of the people whose opinion he'd spent his whole life managing, was the moment I actually believed something had changed. Sighed, Nathan walked me to my car. "Are you coming home tonight?" he asked. "Not tonight." He nodded. No bargaining, no offer to buy me anything this time. Kissed my cheek and walked away. And for the first time in 11 weeks, watching him go, I found myself seriously thinking that maybe I would. I moved home the same day, 11 weeks to the day after I'd left. Lily flew down the stairs and stopped just short of tackling me. "You're staying?" For real. I told her yes, and I meant it. We built a real financial life after that. Monica reviewed everything. Nathan's business interests stayed his, Lily's inheritance stayed protected, my retirement and my salary stayed mine, and we opened one joint household account with no allowances and no surprises. Nathan once joked our monthly budget meeting was less romantic than he'd imagined marriage would be. I told him financial transparency was extremely sexy. He asked me to never say that again. Diane and I never became close, but about 6 months later she showed up at the door to drop something off for Lily and said simply, "I misjudged you." I said, "You did." She almost smiled. Renee took much longer, and eventually I stopped keeping score, which helped more than anything she ever did. Priya asked me once, over lunch duty in the school cafeteria, whether I regretted any of it, the leaving, the folder, the months of sleeping in Paula's guest room. I told her the truth. I regretted how long it took me to say something out loud in both directions. Staying quiet had never once made anything easier. It had just delayed the conversation until it hurt more. If a story like this is landing for you, let me know in the comments. Would you have taken Diane's $2.3 million or torn up that folder the second you saw it? I read every single one. That stupid Chevy Malibu survived all of it. A year after the wedding, I finally asked Nathan why a man who could buy any car on the lot still drove something that age. "My dad bought it," he said. "It was his last everyday car before he got sick. After he died, I kept it." Lily remembers being picked up in it. Suddenly, it wasn't just an old car. It was important. 6 months later, the transmission finally died, and Nathan looked like he'd lost a dog. He bought a sensible SUV and complained about it for 6 months straight. The old debit card sat in my dresser drawer, barely touched, until one Sunday at a German village estate sale I found an enormous scarred dining table with a water ring dead center. "With everything you could buy," Nathan said. "This is what you want?" I told him I apparently have a type, things that look cheaper than they are. We bought it. Lily's done homework at it for years. Diane's eaten dinner at it more than once without mentioning the scratches, which I count as real growth. I'm 47 now. Looking back, the money is almost the least interesting part of this story. Just turn the lights on Nathan's fear, his family's suspicion, my own assumptions, and eventually my own ability to dress up secrecy as protection when it suited me. Nathan and I are still married, not because I proved I wasn't after his money, and not because he became perfect. What changed is that he stopped treating my trust like something I had to earn while he kept all the information. And I learned that independence never meant refusing everything anyone offered me. It meant being able to say yes or no without owing anyone my dignity for the answer. He still asks sometimes why I said yes to that first coffee. I always tell him the truth. "You had a great car." He hates that answer every single time. I laugh every single time, too. I said yes before I knew what he had. Years later, knowing exactly what he had, I had to decide whether to say yes again. That second yes was the one that actually mattered. If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more like it, and share it with someone who needs to hear that the truth is always worth more than the comfortable version of it. See you in the next one.